Ableism, a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to human people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. Hey everyone, it's Mexi, and if you follow me on Twitter, you will know that I was planning to film this video with half of my face paralyzed, as it has been paralyzed for the past several weeks. But as you can see, it's almost back to normal. My smile is almost symmetrical. See, it's getting there. It's getting there. It used to be like this, just one side. You might be able to tell that this eye is a little bit more open than this eye, but yeah, it used to be just way open. I actually had to tape my eye shut to go to sleep, and sometimes to just do things around the house during the day as well. And they told me that my face could have been paralyzed like that for several months. Um, I still have a little ways to go, but I'm thrilled that we've made this much progress so far. And there was a chance that it could have been permanent. So yeah, thrilled to have my face returned almost to normal. But going through this very serious health issue, getting nerve damage, having my face paralyzed in the midst of this COVID pandemic has inspired me to share my chronic illness story with you all and how our capitalist system that we function within grossly exacerbated it, just as it is grossly exacerbating the suffering that people are feeling under this global pandemic, whether it be from $40,000 of medical debts just to get treatment, or whether it be facing eviction from being laid off and not being able to pay rent because housing is seen as an investment and not a social right. But anyhow, so my story begins. I don't know how long we want to go back, but my story begins at least over a decade ago now. Maybe close to 15 years ago now. How old am I? Ugh. Yes, it begins quite some time ago when I began my journey into stressing my body to the max, to the point that it broke. And I want to take this moment to emphasize that stress is a killer. Elevated stress levels in your body, elevated cortisol levels in your body for prolonged amounts of time can cause a whole range of chronic health problems, heart problems, chronic pain, etc. It can manifest in so many ways. And this is something that we do not take seriously enough as a society in general, especially under toxic capitalist work culture where people wear their exhaustion or their busyness as badges of honor. I feel like being an adult under capitalism is just saying, after next week I'll get a break. After next week I'll take a break until you die. So for over a decade, the levels of stress in my body were completely unmanageable. It started, I think, with my disordered eating. In my late teens, early 20s, I had disordered eating, and this was combined with excessive working out, just working out like you wouldn't believe. I'm actually going to do a collab with some other YouTubers about body image and eating disorders and body dysmorphia and how this relates to patriarchy and capitalism, etc. Because I think that that's a serious issue that people talk about it, but I don't think they relate it to patriarchy and capitalism too explicitly. But anyhow, both of those things, so not giving your body enough calories, carbs, etc., enough nutrients that it needs to carry out its daily functions, releases cortisol in the body. It causes stress to the body. Working out causes stress to the body, right? You're elevating the stress levels in your body. And for normal people, that's fine. But when you combine it with a whole bunch of other things and you're just constantly stressing your body and not giving it a rest, at least to some issues. So that was one part of the equation, my extreme orthorexia and body dysmorphia, which was leading to a lot of stress on my body. Other part of the equation was the workload that I was under. I was doing grad school, I was working, I was teaching, I started creating content, I was doing all the things in order to fund my continuation in school. And, I was working 6, 7 days a week. I was just running myself to the ground. And I was hooked on coffee, caffeine. I would have coffee all day. I don't think that I drank water, a single glass of water in the day. I would just have coffee, 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 coffee until the nighttime where I'd have a nice glass of wine, which is also dehydrating, and then try to go to bed. So what happens when you drink all that caffeine? You raise your cortisol levels in your body. You guessed it. Everything I was doing was raising my stress levels. And all of this stress leads to an outpouring of adrenaline in your body. Your adrenal system turns on because it feels like your body must be under attack. If it's under so much stress, your body must be under attack, right? You must be out as an animal being hunted by something. So your body puts you into fight or flight mode. That's the adrenaline response. And having adrenaline be the source of your energy for prolonged periods of time, it's not so good. It's not so good. So my cortisol levels ended up flipping. They got all messed up. So typically when you wake up, you're supposed to have a rush of cortisol. You have a rush of stress hormone in your body so that it motivates you to get up and get out of bed. And then at night, it's supposed to taper off so that you are ready for sleep. So I had the opposite. And in the morning, I was having no rush of cortisol. And so it was nearly impossible for me to get out of bed, which was compounded by the fact that I was now having spikes of cortisol right before bed, which led to insomnia. So I would be exhausted. I would be physically exhausted from everything I was doing, from all the stress I was putting on my body. But I would get into bed and I would have an adrenaline rush right before I was supposed to be going to sleep. And so I wouldn't get good sleep. I had insomnia for 3 years, 4 years. I had several years there where it's honestly all just a blur. It's all just a blur of me not sleeping, staying up all night, crying because I could not get to sleep. And I just felt so alone and frustrated and angry. And then getting up in the morning and knowing that I had so much work to do and so much to catch up on that I had to just suck it up and just drink all my coffee and go out and do it, right? I was just in this state of, I don't even know how I survived this several years, to be honest. Oh, and guess what raises your cortisol even more? Not sleeping. So I started to develop a lot of pain in my body. It was manifesting in a lot of pain, body pain, mostly migraines, mostly chronic migraines and headaches. So for years, for 6 years, 7 years, I did not know what it felt like to not have a headache during the day. And this has only kind of been resolved in the past couple of weeks of me not having to work as much. And we'll get to it. But, I would constantly have a headache and then it would just get compounded or get exaggerated throughout my day, depending on what I was doing. I'm also a highly sensitive person, so I'm very sensitive to light and sound and things like that, right? It really zaps my energy. And most of the work that I do is on a computer. And so I developed a lot of, problems with my eyes and eye strain and eye pain. Because it was just too much. Everything was too much on my body. I developed hormonal problems, problems with my menstrual cycle. I developed, finally my body just kind of stopped. It just said enough. So I have developed a thyroid problem and a lot of issues with my endocrine system. My endocrine system just kind of shut down. So this has led to chronic fatigue. So I have chronic fatigue now. I have, just an inability to do things that I used to be able to do without having a lot of pain, right? So just my capabilities in general in this body that I'm in right now and everything that it's been through, my capabilities are much reduced. I have to be very, very careful now with my time energy, which is what Nicole from Bitchy Shit Show calls it, is time energy in one, because when you have chronic fatigue, when you have issues with your endocrine system, when you have hormonal issues, etc., there's so much time in the day, right? But you only have so much time energy. So if I exhaust all of my time energy in the morning by doing several hours of intensive work on the computer on a bright screen, which is, difficult for me, it's difficult for my eyes, it triggers my migraines, my headaches. So if I'm doing hours of intense, high level thinking, time sensitive, high pressure work, then I'm pretty much spent, right? My body starts to shut down. I'm having extreme fatigue. I'm having body pains. I'm having migraines, and I need to just lay down for the rest of the night. I've only been recently introduced to the spoon theory or the spoon metaphor and the term spoonie, but I think it might be useful. So this is from Wikipedia. It says the spoon theory is a disability metaphor used to explain the reduced amount of mental and physical energy available for activities of living and productive tasks that may result from disability or chronic illness. Spoons are a visual representation used as a unit of measure in order to quantify how much energy a person has throughout a given day. Each activity requires a given number of spoons, which will only be replaced as the person recharges through rest. A person who runs out of spoons has no choice but to rest until their spoons are replenished. This metaphor is used to describe the planning that many people have to do to conserve and ration their energy reserves to accomplish their activities of daily living. Because healthy people typically are not concerned with the energy expended during ordinary tasks such as bathing and getting dressed, the theory can help others empathize with the consequences of chronic illness or pain on daily routine. So if I'm working like a full day on the computer, and the stress, you're jumping from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, which is also kind of really difficult for, I mean, it's difficult for my brain. It's not necessarily difficult for every brain, but it's just a certain kind of stress. And so after all of that, in the evenings, I would just have to lay down in the dark with ice packs all over my head. I would not be able to, relax and watch a show because I couldn't look at screens. I couldn't even catch up with other YouTubers and watch people's content that they're creating. I could maybe listen to podcasts in the dark, and then, by Friday, after doing this for several days, because once you do it one day, right, you kind of have a fatigue hangover the next day, and you have pain when you wake up the next day. And so when you keep doing this, by the time it's Friday, you're waking up and you're already in an immense pain. You're already immensely, like, your body is already breaking down. You're already exhausted. A lot of times by Friday, maybe Thursday, Friday, I would have to take a whole day off and just lay in bed. Like, I just had days where I could not do anything whatsoever. And then after all of that, on the weekends, oh my goodness. Yeah, Friday nights, I was spent, could not do anything. And every night I would have to go to bed very early, right? You're not gonna catch me awake after 10 p.m. in the evening. Ever. You're never gonna catch me. You're never gonna catch me awake after like even 9:30, right? So, on Fridays, oh my goodness, yeah, I would just be, my partner would come over and we couldn't even like watch a video or anything like that. Honestly, I would have to just lay down in the dark and he would just squeeze my head to help relieve the pressure. Which, bless him, he is a true king, not in the monarchy sense, because fuck the monarchy, but in his soul, in his empathetic capacity. But on the weekends, that would be what it would be, and then I would have to just rest just so that I could get up on Monday and start doing this over again and just put my body through more and more pain, just to be able to live. Just to be able to live. But this is not a life. It's not a life. If I wanted to see friends on the weekend, I would always schedule things during the day because the evenings would be so difficult for me. By the time the evening comes, I am done. I am in my bed, in the dark. And so, sometimes I would go out, right? Like, I host meetups and things like that, in Toronto with other amazing YouTubers. So you should come out. But, I love doing things like that. But, as it gets into the night and it's late and I'm exhausted and my fatigue is kicking in, my pain is kicking in, there's lights, there's sound, there's everything. It's really, really hard to be present with people. It's really hard to be present with people when you're in pain, because in the back of your mind, you're having fun, but in the back of your mind, you're just thinking like, oh my God, I need to go home. I need to go home. I can't wait to go home and lay down. And that's a really shitty feeling when you're out with your friends that you haven't seen in a long time. Um, and I'm sure a lot of you know the stress of feeling like, I have an invisible disability, right? I have nobody really knows what's going on with me. I have a hard time advocating for myself, and it's hard when you have to cancel plans with friends and you're trying to, tell them what's going on, and they don't really understand, and they don't, especially with all of my issues, right? If I say, oh yeah, well, it's my thyroid, it's my chronic migraines, it's my fatigue, it's my this, it's my that, right? It's so many things. But especially related to my adrenals, right? If I say, oh, it's adrenal fatigue, because that captures a lot of what I'm feeling, people will just jump in and be like, oh, did you know that's not really a thing? That's not really a medical thing. Like, okay, well, fine, fine, fucking whatever. But these are the symptoms that I'm having. This is the capacity of my body. This is the pain that I'm in. And anyway, it's just a mess. And being a content creator is really difficult as well, having these kinds of issues, especially not being able to be on screens for very long, after the work that I have to do in my everyday life. So I think you've probably noticed recently that Tristan from Step Back has been editing my videos. Bless you, Tristan, because he does an amazing job. You should just check him out if you want some editing work done. So part of my Patreon money is going towards that, of course. And I've been getting some help as well, editing the Vegan Vanguard podcast that I co host. So that's been really great. But I feel like I'm just not able to do anything at my full capacity because I'm being forced to do everything all at once at a reduced capacity. And it's difficult being on Patreon. I noticed that everyone on Patreon has Discord as one of their rewards, and you will never catch me on Discord. You will never catch me on Discord. That is just sitting in front of a screen nonstop trying to look at this, the constant stream of chat. There's so much going on. I can't do it. I can't do it. And people have messaged me and been like, oh, hey, where can I, meet and talk to other followers of the Vegan Vanguard? Because I would love to be in a group like that. And I'm just like, well, I would love to manage a Facebook group or a Discord server dedicated to that, but I cannot because after work, you know where I am. I'm in my bed. I'm in the dark. I'm with my ice hats on. So anyway, I mean, I kept going to specialist after specialist after specialist, and no one could really help me. No one could really help me. They could try to give me some pills to mask the pain, but they couldn't really get at the root of the problem, because the root of the problem is that my body is just not able to work at the frenetic pace and at the level of hours per week that is demanded of all of us in order to be considered worthy of having housing and food and basic necessities. And in this toxic capitalist work culture, I've also been incredibly afraid of what that would mean, like what it would mean to stop, what it would mean to fail, what it would mean to admit that I can't do this. I can't go on like this. I cannot, my body doesn't function this way, right? What it would mean to admit that I'm a disabled person in this capitalist system, right? And I've been quite uncomfortable, I guess, claiming that because I have so much able bodied privilege and I grew up able bodied and everything like that. So, I find it difficult to come out with. But I went to see a specialist recently, and they gave me this questionnaire, and it was all about my pain levels and my condition and how much it kept me from work. And based on the answers to that questionnaire, they told me that I have a severe disability. And my disabled friends tell me, like, girl, yes, you're disabled and you're becoming increasingly disabled. And it's actually quite good for people with invisible disabilities to come out and talk about it, because for one, it gets rid of kind of the stigma, I guess, and it also helps people see that capitalism is just a giant fuck you to disabled people. Capitalism does not give a single fuck about disabled people or their lives. Capitalism as a system is based on continual growth, the continual accumulation of wealth by the capitalists who own the means of production and make all of us work for them in order to access food. And in this system, your value as a person is intrinsically tied up with your ability to be productive. And I'm putting productive in air quotes because there are innumerable ways that people can be productive, productive in service of well-being, the well-being of others, well-being of the environment, etc. But if you're not productive in service to capital, if you're not productive in ways that make money for capitalists, then you have no value. Capital has no use for you. You're completely superfluous to capital. And why should you have anything that you need to survive if you're not contributing to capital accumulation? Why should anyone work and help you to survive, right? We live in an individual society. We have individual freedom. You have the individual freedom to produce and consume. And if you won't take your freedom, if you won't live up to your freedom to produce constantly, frenetically in this system, then what use are you? You are useless. You're a drain. That's what defines you as a person. And I spoke with Nicole and Callie on the Bitchy Shit Show about this. Shameless plug, we did a 2-part episode on COVID, which you should check out. But, we spoke about this and I said, I have so much to give. I have so much that I can contribute. But I can only contribute maybe 10 to 20 hours of solid work per week, in service to capital per week, comfortably, without hurting myself, without driving myself further and further into a health crisis. We haven't even gotten to what's going on with my neck and what happened to my face. We're still not even there in the story time. But, I have a lot to give. I have a lot to contribute to well-being, to the service of collective well-being, and building a future and an economy that supports people and supports the environment. I have a lot to contribute to this world, not necessarily to capital, to which I am vehemently opposed, but I do still have a lot to give. But because I am not a fully able-bodied extroverted, because you've got to be extroverted, you've got to get out there and network, you've got to be down with having team meetings with smiles on your faces all the time, you have to be down with being surrounded by people in a crowded office, which for a serious introvert, and by that I mean someone, doesn't mean that I'm antisocial or I don't like being around people or being around my friends. It means that it takes a lot of my energy to be around a lot of people. That's what introversion means. So if you're an introvert and your energy is being zapped, right? It's just, in situations like that, I am just drained to the end and I lose my will to live, frankly. But, in the system, you need to be an able-bodied, high energy extrovert that is ready to work 60 hours per week. Otherwise, you're a slacker. You don't deserve your house. You don't deserve to live. You don't deserve your food. You don't deserve anything. I actually looked into going on disability in Ontario and whether I would apply for some kind of benefit or some kind of top up to my income. But I learned very quickly that it would be completely pointless because in Ontario, you are only allowed to make up to $300 per month before they start clawing back all of your benefits. And the maximum you can get is like $1,000 per month, which you cannot pay rent in Toronto for $1,000 per month. So I'm not sure how anyone can live on that. And the clawback system means that they actively discourage you from contributing to capital. They actively discourage you from actually working at all. Because if you do, you'll just have your benefits clawed back. The truly sick thing is that in Canada, the relief package that's being given to people who have recently become unemployed due to COVID is $2,000 per month for the next 4 months. That is more than people who are on disability are receiving, and they don't qualify for that money. They can't even apply for that money because they've been incentivized not to work in order to get the disability benefits. So they can't prove that they're unemployed now because of COVID. So instead of, like someone like me, and I'm sure many others who can only work, part time, 10, 20 hours per week because of disability or health issues that we're dealing with, instead of being able to access benefits in terms of, okay, I can only work this many hours per week because of disability. This many hours per week does not give me a living wage. So I need some benefit top up to that. That would make sense. That would be a system that would make sense. Instead of that, it's like, no, you shouldn't work at all. You should just accept this benefit, which is not a living wage. And people always talk about disabled people or people on welfare as just these drains on society, that, oh, they're not contributing anything. They're just sitting there accepting the benefits. Well, we would contribute. We would contribute maybe half the time, maybe 2/3 of the time. We would still contribute if we had support, if there was adequate fucking support, But for me, my option is, not working at all and not getting a living wage, which is not an option, or working myself to death, making my chronic issues that much worse all the time in order to make a living wage, and just not getting any benefits at all, not getting any support, and just driving myself into the grave. That's the option. So anyhow, this led me to obviously take on a lot of work contracts right now, which I'm thrilled about, and I love what I am doing. But all of it together, the stress of all of that, combined with some recent emotional stress that I was having, led to me having a serious shingles attack at the age of 33. So you can probably see it on my neck a little bit. This is way better. I'm actually going to post a photo so everyone can see the carnage that I went through recently. Please check it out right here. But it was all over my neck and my shoulder and my back, and it was up on my face, this half of my face, and my ear. It's actually very dangerous. And it runs in your nerve pathway. So I was having amazing, just fantastical nerve pain that was going up into my head, into my eye, my jaw, my ear. And it damaged some of the nerves in my brain so that half of my face became paralyzed. And it's getting better. You can see it's not quite there. Half my face is still not quite there, but boy is it better. Boy is it better than it was. So all this to say that by the time COVID hit, I was, in my bed with the shingles. I was just experiencing the most intense physical burnout that I have ever experienced. And you know what? After just a few weeks of me not working at that frenetic pace, I still had to work to move the course that I was delivering online and deliver that online. But a lot of my other contracts slowed down. Just having 3 weeks to rest and to heal my body has done so much. Just very recently, I have, in the first time in 7 years, I have had days without pain, without headaches. I still have fatigue, but obviously I'm not doing as much. I'm just sitting in my house. I'm practicing extreme social distancing because I am very immunocompromised and I do not want to catch COVID-19. But it only took that much time for my body to really rebound. And it's absolutely ridiculous that it took this global pandemic and this shingles attack and facial paralysis to actually give me the space and time to rest and heal. And I am so fucking privileged. I am so ridiculously privileged that I was able to even take this time off, that I was able to, move some of my work online and still be getting a paycheck right now, because there are disabled people out there who are working essential services who are not getting a slowdown at all right now. They are not getting a break. There are so many disabled people who have been laid off or who are just really struggling to make ends meet due to all of this social isolation. There are disabled and immunocompromised people who are getting sick and dying of this virus and getting permanent lung damage and things like that at very young ages. because they are immunocompromised, and especially in the United States where people can't even access healthcare because there's a huge paywall there. And the worst part is that there are a lot of people and politicians and just everyone saying that it's okay. It's all right. It's not such a big deal. The virus, oh, it only affects elderly people. It only affects immunocompromised people and disabled people. So, it's not that bad. It's not going to affect me. Not only are people seemingly fine with the idea of immunocompromised, elderly, and disabled people being killed by this, there are some people actually saying that they should sacrifice themselves for the good of the economy, for the good of those stonks. That to me is just the hugest fuck you to disabled people if I've ever seen one. They are brazenly saying that if you aren't at full capacity, if you aren't fully able-bodied and fully ready to contribute to that labor process, then you should be sacrificed for the good of able-bodied people who properly contribute to that line going up for their bosses. This is the kind of eugenics that the Nazis embraced. Disabled people were among the first to be targeted and killed by fascist regimes. And this is a primer, right? This really primes you for further hierarchical thinking, because if you accept that there are groups of people who their lives don't really matter as much, they can die, it's fine if they die, they can be sacrificed, then you are ready to accept all kinds of bigoted hierarchical thinking about what different people deserve based on who they are, based on their proximity to whiteness, to power, to the propertied class, to ownership, to their productivity as defined by capital, which completely negates and erases all of the rich, incredible aspects of everyone's personhood outside of that. There's evidence that even in pre-Neolithic societies, in societies that were based around hunting and gathering, that they still took care of disabled people. So even if people weren't able to necessarily hunt or necessarily gather based on whatever their disability might have been, the community still saw them as someone with personhood who had value, right? They could still be knowledge holders. They could contribute to cultural advancement, to medicines, to clothing, etc., depending on whatever the disability is. The point is that there is so much more to a person's personhood, and there's so many more ways that people can contribute to, other people's lives and to society at large that don't revolve around what they're able to produce for capital. And even outside of COVID, right? Put COVID aside for a second. There are so many disabled people who are always housing insecure, who are always food insecure, who are always forced to not work and just rely on ODSB or some other kind of shitty benefit program that does not give them enough to live their life. And nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's so normalized. It's just completely normalized that if you cannot work a 40-hour week in X, Y, and Z ways, in the exact ways that we want you to work in the service of capital, then you don't deserve a living wage, right? But this is happening all the time. This is happening all the time, and this pandemic only puts this into greater focus, into greater relief. COVID is really showing a lot of otherwise privileged, able-bodied people what it is like to have to try to make ends meet when you are not able to work full time. But this is how it is for a lot of people all of the time, and they still deserve a life full of human dignity. They still deserve what they need. They are still contributing in so many ways. And I haven't even gotten into the whole idea of access and accessibility, right? Like there's so many ways that people can contribute, but it's just not, the society that we live in or the workforce that we live in is just not set up. It doesn't provide them the accessibility requirements that they need to actually contribute meaningfully. So it's not their problem. It's the fact that, as a society, we don't set things up properly. We don't allow for that to happen. And it should not be like this at all. COVID is really showing us that so many of our jobs, so many of our jobs are unessential. So many of our jobs are completely superfluous to what is actually needed for a rich, full human life. So many of our jobs are not only superfluous or, not necessary for, taking care of the well-being of people and the planet. Many jobs are actually actively destroying people and destroying the planet. They're actually actively negative and parasitic. So no matter how much work you can do within this system, how much productivity you can do within this system, I mean, productivity for what? Productivity for fucking what? And COVID is actually showing us that we can take care of everyone's needs. Oops, how are we going to pay for it? Well, it turns out that we have trillions of dollars that we didn't know we had. We have trillions of dollars to throw at the stock market. We have trillions of dollars to throw into corporate bailouts, which will only further concentrate wealth at the top of the hierarchy, because the CEOs of these corporations are not going to focus on paying their workers, even though the workers are out of work, they can't actually physically work. They're going to focus on stock buybacks, and they're going to lay off all their workers as soon as they can. So that's only going to concentrate wealth further at the top. And, it's so ridiculous. We have all this money for the stock market. We have barely any money to give directly into people's hands. We have no money apparently for UBI or even universal health care in the States. And if you want to stave off a depression, you don't throw a ton of money into the stock market, which doesn't actually help people. If there is no money in working people's hands, if people don't have money to pay their rent, to go buy groceries, or anything like that, then you have a problem of effective demand. And that's when you enter very deep depressions, very deep recessions. So if you want to stave off depression and disaster, you give money to the people who need it, not the people who don't. But anyway, this is a tangent. The point is that COVID is showing us that we can take care of everyone's needs. We have the resources to lower everyone's workload, to make sure everyone has the essentials, and we have the resources to slow this capitalist growth-based machine that is destroying the planet. A radically different communal needs-based economy is not only possible, it is necessary, because this is not sustainable. We cannot go on like this much longer. So I hope this spurs a serious, serious culture shift. I hope that for some people who are slowing down right now, the slowdown shows them just how much is being robbed from them in this toxic work culture, all of the time that is being robbed from them to be with their loved ones, to do projects that they're actually excited about, to actually rest and heal their bodies so that they feel good physically, they feel good in their bodies. We're robbed of that. There is no reason why we need to be going at such a hyper frenetic pace. That pace is just set by the dictates of capital accumulation. We don't need to be going at that pace. It's destroying ourselves, it's destroying our environment. What we need is seasons of work and seasons of rest, to quote Adrienne Maree Brown. Housing should be a social right. Healthcare should be a social right. Food should be a social right. Food security should be a social right. This is what we should be putting our resources towards, not the fucking stock market. So that on the other side of this, the other side of COVID-19, we don't return to this rapacious, exploitative, horrible system that hates you, hates everyone, and hates the planet. We all deserve so much better, and I, for one, after seeing how much better I am doing after just a few weeks of reduced workload, and I'm gonna have to go back to not the same workload that I was at, but I'm gonna have to start returning to a higher level of workload this month. But, I'm not going back to the way it was. I'm not going back to hurting myself to such a degree that I could not enjoy my life, that I'm breaking out in shingles at age 33 and paralyzing my face. I am not going back to that. I'm saying that as an emphatic, I'm not going back to that. But what I mean is, I hope we're not going back to that. I really hope we're not going back to that. I hope we are done with that. So, this video, I didn't even scratch the surface in all of the ways that capitalism harms disabled people. I didn't even talk about accessibility. I didn't talk about different kinds of disabilities, like with sight or hearing or anything like that. So I'm sorry for that. This was just surface level. This was just my own personal experience. and how I've been impacted by all of these systems and my chronic illness. And I just hope that it inspires people to dig more into disability justice and disability issues, into issues around ableism in our current society. I'm going to put a number of resources in the description box that you can check out. And I hope it inspires people to just really question our toxic work culture and question this idea of productivity under capitalism. And, what is the point? What is the point of so much of what we are doing if it is so harmful to our beings, if it erases and negates our very personhood, and if it destroys the environment while we're doing it? I mean, what is the point? As climate change worsens, we will only be seeing more and more pandemics arise and more climate crises arise that will disrupt the business as usual flow of work. And we need to face the fact that capitalism is not a system that is going to be able to get people through these crises. Capitalism, Econ 101 imagines capital as a perfect system in perfect equilibrium, and it doesn't even account for crises, doesn't even acknowledge them. So it is not a system that's going to carry people through these things. People are not going to be able to make rent. They're not going to be able to buy food. And we need to really accept that and move forward and radically re-envision our economy. I want to give a special thanks to my patrons this month. You have seen me through thick and thin. You have honestly seen me through so many health crises, so many delayed videos for this or that reason, and you've been so supportive and so uplifting to me all the way through that. I cannot thank you enough. I can't tell you how much it has meant to me, and honestly how important it has been financially for me to help me weather all of this. So solidarity forever to all of you. You are simply the best. And yeah, my heartfelt thanks to all of you always. Thank you to Tristan, as usual, for editing this video. If you would like to support the show, you can become a monthly patron donor, or you can give me a one-time tip via PayPal. Check out my podcast at veganvanguardpodcast.com. Find me on Facebook and Twitter. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in another video.